Hey, so in this video we're going to talk about painting on Procreate and why is it such a good application if you want to improve your sketching. And yeah, let's get started. So the first things first, the number of brushes that Procreate offers and the amount of free brushes that you can get online, it's so great. Like, you just have them at your disposal at all times and you can experiment with multiple brushes, and there are different sort of textures, and you can just find what speaks to you the most and whatever works for you if you're coming from a traditional background. Procreate also lets you have references that you're drawing on the side, so if you're someone like me who sees value shapes instead of the subject that they're drawing, that's really great. So let me just take a screenshot and show you what I mean. So if the canvas size and the reference that I'm using are of the same dimensions, then I can just see these shapes. So when I'm making a portrait, I often compare the distances that these lines have from the border of the canvas, and then I just build upon that. So it's constantly like a comparison thing, which you cannot really do that easily if you're sketching traditionally. So that is something that really is going to help you out. And just keep in mind that even if this foundation is really loose, I'm trying to be precise, and that is what you should aim for too. Because the eyes, the nose, the mouth, everything, it just builds upon it. So if the foundation is all screwed up and things are not in the right place, then you're going to have a harder time later on. Some of you might have noticed this is a quick study of John Singer Sargent. He was, in my opinion, one of the best portrait painters like ever. So one thing that I really noticed and that stood out the most about his works is that he really focused on big shapes. So if you were to zoom in and see any of his sketching works, basically he almost always focused on the big shapes and made sure that the values read correctly. So even if you were to squint your eyes, it would still look as a portrait of the person. However, if you were to zoom all the way in and see these features in isolation, it would be a bunch of marks. He even used some parallel hatching lines, but it all sort of made sense the further you moved away from the painting, which is really interesting. It's like he's using some abstract forms to convey something realistic. And I think it works in opposite ways. So you have to learn how to render realistically so you can move backwards and simplify things. So I'm not saying that you have to do some hyper realistic stuff to be able to do something like this, but simplification is almost like you have to learn what to leave out and what you need to put in for the form to read correctly and for the portrait to look like the person that you're drawing. And it is an observational skill, so you have to learn to be able to see things correctly. So I work in a different way too. So when I'm sketching traditionally pencil on paper, I am making sure that the likeness is spot on, because it's not really that easy to fix when you're working on paper. So the graphite can damage to the paper and you may not be able to erase the details later on. And digital is much more flexible that way. So anyways, if I'm sketching traditionally, I am working on the likeness and then going towards the rendering, but I don't have to work in that order when I'm sketching on Procreate. Also, another advantage that Procreate users have when they're working on a portrait is that you can just pick the values and then just put it down on the canvas. That is not the case with traditional sketching, unfortunately. So if you're coming from the same background and you're using pencils, then you just know that you have to build on the values, especially if you're using graphite, because charcoal, you can still manage with the values, but with graphite you have to build them up. So if you're starting from a value 2, you cannot just jump to value 9. You have to build it up to 4B, 8B, and then later on even 10B. But in Procreate, again, you can just have that value right on the palette and then you can just put it down wherever you need the dots. And any beginner artist that is using Procreate, I really want you to not underestimate this benefit that you have with this application. And that is because improving is not always about quality over quantity. Different kind of skills are required to build up the sketch, and then there's a different set of skills to just render. And in my opinion, the former one is just so much more difficult than the later stages, because you have acquired so much skill in that first stage that the rest of it just sort of comes easy to you. And with a digital application, you don't really need to worry about building up the values, which in turn saves you time, which in turn increases the quantity of works that you can produce in each week. So if you have a reference that you really like, then just experiment and sketch them out on both the mediums. I have a personal bias towards sketching, but again, you cannot really ignore what Procreate brings to the table with the textures that it has. Like, it has different overlays, and you can just experiment with the grains and the noise, and you can even use the liquify tool to adjust the proportions, even at the later stages of the drawing when you're like 90% done. So all in all, it is just a great way to practice your sketching. And the textures and the quality of brushes that come with Procreate, like, I'm not even talking about the ones that you get online. I'm just talking about the default brushes that Procreate comes with. If you were to stop this video right now and take a screenshot, zoom all the way in, then you will be able to notice like 70 to 80% of the textures that I have right now in this painting are coming from that Procreate pencil brush that comes in the section of sketching, and that is a default brush, and it's scary good. Even the way that these brushes behave, like if you're using a technical pencil, 6B pencil, or a Derwent one, you will be noticing that they're so much closer to what they're actually like in traditional sketching, from application to even the smudging. So it's really great. Anyways, I think I would just call it at this point. This is what I came up with after like a 2-hour drawing session. I hope you got something out of this video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one.